Hello, everyone. You're in the office with Joseph Skoda. Yeah, G.I. Joe Skoda. All that great stuff. I have a lot going on in my life and I'm part of Social Media Shows Network and been doing this show for quite some time. And what I've noticed when I do shows, it's more exciting when I have an interview. It's more exciting when I have someone who empowers others, someone who inspires someone else, someone that has a little edge to them. And that's always exciting. And today will be no different than any other time I had a great interview. I want to introduce everyone to a good friend of mine from the Central Coast of California, Honey French, who's an author and, well, so many other things going on. I'll let her tell them. But Honey, welcome to the show.
Hi, Joe. I'm sure excited to be on. And you're someone that accomplishes so much. It's an honor and a privilege to be on your program.
Well, thank you so much. Now, we're really quick, before we even get started, I met you through a writers club in San Luis Obispo a year and a half ago, something like that. And I went there. My job was to help a lot of authors brand and market their books. Basically, that's what I was doing. And I met some great people, like you, for instance. And you are probably the only book I picked up, Officer Honey. Officer Honey, which sounds like a interesting name, but your name is Honey. So, does that come after a family member or someone? Your name?
Well, there's quite a story about my name, actually.
Yeah.
I was born Luella K. Fong, but my mother called me Honey from infancy. So all my friends and relatives know me as Honey. And only the school kids knew me as Luella K. And I hated that name. And at 16, I decided to be Honey full time. It was like I was going to be this new identity. To me, Luella K was a loser that wore the hand-me-down clothes. They had the racial insults. They had the traumatic childhood. And I was going to be this new person. So I went as Honey. And then it was many years later, I gave my life to the Lord. And I was praying one day, and I heard in my heart, God said, I named you Honey. And that made me feel really good that God named me Honey. And then a little while later, in my heart, I heard, don't throw away Luella K. She's a sweet, hurting little girl. And Honey's that with it, not so nice woman. So I want you to integrate the positives and toss away the negatives. So I'm trying to do that. And then a little while later, I heard in my heart, you're a warrior when you pray in the Spirit. And then two prophetic people came and told me the same thing separately. And then a little while later, I heard about a conference, a Christian conference. I went to it, and at registration, they asked us to put down all the names we've ever been called at registration. And even then I said, oh, do I have to let them know my name is Luella K? But I did. And we didn't know they were going to do this, Joe. They came back with definitions. Luella means warrior. And K means rejoicing. So God named me both names. Warrior, Warrior, and it did some healing in my heart.
You know, that's pretty amazing. Often we reject things that mean the most, and it could just be a name or anything else. We often reject things. Well, tell us a little bit about your childhood.
Well, as long as I can remember, we lived in constant fear and tension. We never knew what was going to happen next. And it was just so awful. My father's car would come into the driveway, and my mother would hiss, hush, the bastard's coming home. And we'd be filled with fear. We didn't know if we'd be drunk, violent, both, in a rage.
All right, so Honey, once again, I appreciate about your book. And we mentioned that you're an author, you're also a prison guard, and so many other things going on. But I just want I want the audience, our audience here, to know a little bit more about your background and what brought you to where you are today.
Well, I was running away from God, just living a life of pleasure. And then he captured my heart through God arranged appointments. And that took away the fear of my giving my life to him. Because of my childhood, my father was very violent and angry. And I thought God was like that. And I was scared of God. And I thought that God's will would be hard, difficult, no fun, and something horrible. But through these God arranged appointments that he arranged, I realized God is powerful enough to cause our paths to cross each other. And he loves me enough to take the time to do it. And that took away the fear. And then when I gave my life to him, I realized that scripture I kind of based my life on, Philippians 2:13. God is at work within you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. Then I see how my childhood was equipping me and molding me and getting ready for what I'm doing now. And my traumatic childhood gave me compassion and a desire to help hurting people not waste their pain and sorrow, but use it for their own good and to benefit others. And so I knew I was supposed to write this book, Officer Honey. And in it, I tell about my childhood, how we lived in constant fear and tension. We never knew what was going to happen next. And we were terrified. And my father's car would drive into the driveway, and my mother would hiss, "Hush, the bastard's coming home." And we'd be filled with fear and apprehension. And it was like that. And they'd have violent arguments, and we'd be hiding in our room scared. And one time he actually tried to kill her, or he was strangling her, and the police came. And that was really traumatic. But now I use all of those experiences, and I can help people because they know when I say I understand, they really know I do, and I'm not faking it. And I have compassion and empathy, and I'm able to help them forgive. I know how difficult it is to forgive. Sometimes you can have a root of bitterness, and I was in an abusive situation, and I would never stay in an abusive situation because I know not to. But it had very unusual circumstances, and that's going to be in another book. But I know what it's like to have a root of bitterness, and you want to forgive, and you keep trying to forgive, and you can't. And it's something that God grants the spirit of repentance, and he can actually totally free you from it, where you think of the incidents that happen, and it's almost like you're emotionally removed and it happened to somebody else, and you have the memories without the pain. And after forgiveness, the difference is like night and day.
That's something else. If I'm not mistaken, you had two younger sisters?
Yes, and we all reacted differently because, but we were all warped to some extent. But I'd rather talk about all the good things that's happening, if that's okay.
Of course. Of
Yeah.
course. Tell us what's going on.
Well, one time I was praying, and well, actually, I'm a real happy person now after I gave my life to the Lord, and my life has a lot of fulfillment and purpose. And I'm not usually, I'm never lonely. But one day I felt lonely, and I asked God, "Are you ever lonely?" And he shocked me with his reply. He said, "Yes." He said, "My heart gets lonely. I love the multitudes, but many of them don't come to me. And I have empty spaces in my heart that only those people can fill." And I cried, I think for about 2 hours. I just sobbed. And he was doing things in my heart. And I was already telling people about Jesus and what his love and what he can do in their lives. but it's like it was a greater depth where, oh God, change me so I can win more souls for you. And so because I came to the Lord through God arranged appointments, I don't know if I told you that, but when I was running away from him, I had a series of God arranged appointments, and a year and a half of them when I moved to this area for the job of being a correctional officer. And also in the book, it explains why someone my size, 5'2", 104 pounds, would even think of wanting to be a correctional officer in a prison. But that scripture again, God is at work within you. He put the desire in me to want to help. And he actually did that through a series of circumstances that I ended up working for Department of Corrections as a secretary. And I read their case histories, and it gave me compassion for them, and I wanted to help them change. And then I used to go to a church in Sacramento, and I wanted people to feel at home. So I would go to newcomers and greet them. And this one newcomer turned out to be going to school to be a parole agent. And I told her how I was working for corrections and wanted to help. And she said, oh, why don't you be a volunteer for this organization? And so I started out by being a secretary once a week, I think it was. And then later the leader of the group asked me to go into prisons once a month. And it was a pre-release class. And there'd be 150 inmates and 5 to 15 volunteers. And it was at Vacaville Prison. And I really enjoyed that. And then they would put a man on the hot seat, and he'd tell as little or as much about his life and crime as he wanted, and what he was going to do differently. And then we would ask him questions. Well, have you considered this? If you did such and such, like you said, it could lead to this. And I loved doing that. And then there'd be social time afterward. Then I attended what's called post-release class in Sacramento, and parolees would come, and we tried to help them, quote, get their heads straight. And then, so when the door opened to be women to be the first officers, I decided I thought it would be a stepping stone to be a correctional counselor. And then, so I started being the first woman correctional officer in our area at this state prison with 2 other women. And it was so horrible for the first year and a half. Horrible, horrible, horrible.
Wow.
But I stuck it out because I didn't want to return to Sacramento defeated. And it took me about a year and a half, but the atmosphere started changing. The men started acting like men instead of animals. And I ended up loving that horrible job. There'd be scary, stressful times, but the joy of being used to help men outweighed the bad. And I stayed there 23 years.
23 years in the prison system for the state of California. What were some of your bigger challenges that you had to overcome to even want to stay that long?
Well, the unforgiveness was a big one. And I learned about God's love, and hurting people hurt people. And even before I was a Christian, I realized that my mother and father were doing the best they could. And they were so filled with their own needs that it prevented them from seeing the needs of their children. So I could understand them more. And then one day I was praying, and God said, I have oceans of love for people, oceans. But some people only take teaspoons full of it. And other people only take tiny droplets of my love. And then there's others they only get a fine mist from being near the droplets. And so that filled me with more desire to help people know the Lord. And so at the prison, there were so many men transformed by God. And the whole second half of the book are their amazing testimonies of changes in men and interesting stories. And then now, everywhere I go, on airplanes, on trains, bus stations, got shocks when it was open here. Carl's Jr., I'd meet people and God would tell me things about them and I'd share his love with them and they'd give their lives to the Lord or receive, if they're already Christians, they go on a deeper walk. Many of them receive their heavenly prayer language. And I just have exciting adventures and it's lots of fun. And he even gave me a toilet bowl adventure. Could I tell you about that?
Please do. Tell us a little about the toilet bowl adventure. Please do.
Well, when we were first married, we lived in an apartment and there was a black spot where the enamel was scraped off in the toilet bowl right next to the water line. And you open the bathroom door and you'd see that black spot and it looked like you know what. And I hated that. And at that time, I don't know if they have something now, but at that time, they didn't have anything to cover the enamel with to make it white again. And it always bothered me. So one day, my husband left a ring around the tub. And I would come home and see that ring. And I would think, I'm working all day. And he has more time than I, and he could clean that ring. And so one day it really got to me. And I was really complaining to God. And then I heard in my heart, didn't you ask for a servant's heart? Yes, but... And then he should know better. Didn't you ask for a servant's heart? Yes, I'll try to do it with the right attitude. So I put the cleanser on the ring and I was going to take this plastic bowl and fill it with water and splash it on the ring. So I turned on the faucet on the bathtub and he had forgotten to change the thing and water came out of the shower on my head. I closed the faucet, slammed the door, stomped past him to another room. And I had this rage because I was born with rage from my father. And so I was battling this. Whoa, no, he didn't mean to do it. Yes, but he should know better. Well, he asked this time, you should clean after. Yes, but you asked for back and forth, back and forth. And finally I said, this isn't me. It's not God. It's the devil. And I don't want it. And I rebuked it in Jesus' name. I got set free of years and years and years of having this rage. And I don't have rage anymore. And so I was kind of like really happy. So I decided I was going to clean the toilet bowl. So then there was that black spot. And when I swished, it disappeared. And I said, that's a miracle. And my head said, oh, it must have been a black thing that finally broke loose. Well, if that was true, there'd be black spots from that thing that was there. Wow. And I looked and the water was sparkling clear. I said, God, that was a miracle. And I heard, yes. But why? I didn't even ask for it. And he said, to show you I love you. I know how hard it was for you to battle that rage. And I'm so pleased with you. I wanted to do something for you. And I was so stunned. This was a huge miracle for me. And I decided to take out the trash, which he's supposed to do. So he was working on my car outside with the hood up. So I walked past him and I threw the garbage away. And then when I started to go back in the house, I said, I got to tell Richard. I said, so I went to the car, Richard. And he poked his head out of the hood. Yes, honey. I said, Richard, you know that black spot in the toilet bowl? He says, yes. God healed it. He says, yes, God's good. He went back under the hood. And I started back. I said, I don't think he understood. This is a miracle. And I went back, Richard, I don't think he understood. God healed it. It's not there anymore. He said, honey, I'm so used to big miracles. I forgot you're not. You're kind of new to this. He said, while you're in the house, I was praying for you, and God gave me a vision of the toilet bowl with a black spot. And he said, Richard, pray in tongues, release your face for honey. I want to do a miracle. And he saw, just like that, I don't know if you saw that. There was a television commercial years ago, and it showed a toilet bowl and a broom, upright broom, that swished the toilet and it was clean. He saw that in the vision and knew that it was all clear and clean. So when I came out, he wasn't surprised at all.
That's a real good vision. And that's one of those miracles you want to talk about over and over again. And that's a good point. You mentioned, or he mentioned, he has miracles all the time. And a lot of us don't notice those things around us, or they're so small we don't realize what a big deal it is. And anywhere from that, are there any other kind of miracles that you experience? And I know you have, of course, but maybe somewhere where you convince someone else that like, hey, this is a God's miracle. Is there been a time like that you want to share?
Yes, it's a two-part story. I was going to a conference in Anaheim on a chartered bus, and I had this ring on my finger. And it's very special because it's the last thing my husband and I bought together before he died. And so it was really loose. And I thought I should take it off because I could lose it. But I had a big tote bag at the time. And if I put it in there, it'd get scratched. Or if I wrapped it in tissue, I'd forget and toss it. So I thought I'll leave it on my finger and be careful. And also, one of the men that I helped in prison, one of the inmates, was already, he loved the Lord, but I helped him in many ways. And I helped him learn how to help people receive the prayer language. And he paroled, and he was supervising a $10 million warehouse for Walmart and was doing very well. And he volunteered to be one of 200 ushers at this event. I knew from God that God put that faith in my heart. I knew we were going to find each other, and he didn't have a cell phone. There was going to be 200 ushers. The capacity of the auditorium was 8,000, so probably 7,500 people there. And I knew we were going to find each other. So our bus arrives, and someone said, your usher for this bus is at the top of these stairs. And we go up, and sure enough, our usher was Paul. So we had a great reunion. He showed us to our seats, and it witnessed to Paul of what God does out of his love. And God uses this story a lot. So I got to my seat, and then went to the restroom, came back, my ring's gone. And I ran back to the restroom. I figured when I washed my hands or when I dried my hands, I even threw over the trash can, looked through all the towels, put all the towels back in, washed my hands. It wasn't under my auditorium seat, and it wasn't under the bus seat. So I prayed, God, would you please have an angel bring my ring back to me? You know how special this ring is. And for about 2 months, I just kept, or 3 weeks, I kept thanking the Lord. Thank you, you're having an angel bring the ring back to me. Thank you, Lord, for finding my ring. I'm going to find it, and Angel's going to bring it back. 3.5 weeks later, right where I walk in the living room, it wasn't there the day before, and there it was.
Wow. Wow.
And then the ring, I was telling somebody this story. There's the head, there's the body, and there's the wing. And then you even know it looks like an angel.
It sure does. It sure does. That's
So
wow.
that encouraged a lot of people to trust God when they lose things too.
Sure would. Now you have children, if I'm not mistaken. How many kids do you have? Or they live nearby?
A boy and a girl.
Okay.
And my son lives in Rio Grande.
Okay.
And he has quite a story that I'm not able to give at this time.
Okay, that's okay.
But he has an amazing testimony. And now he does the sound system for a church in the area.
Nice.
And then my daughter lives in Oakland, and she goes on mission trips once or twice a year. And the story of how they came to Lord 7 years after I was a Christian, it's quite amazing too. And then God protects us too. Like you protect me so many times at the prison and in so many different ways. And, he can protect us in small things and big things. One time my husband and I were leaving a Bible study that he led. And we were on Highway 101 around Avila turnoff. And we heard this tremendous loud noise. Bang. We both said, "What's that?" And there on my passenger window was a hole. And then it started spreading out like spider web. And Richard said, "We were shot at." And all this glass started coming in all around my seat, around me, all over, covering me on my lap. And so we didn't even know where the police station was, but we found it. And then they called the county sheriff. And when they came, the two deputies went round and round, in and out of the car for quite a while. And we knew one was a Christian and the other, I like to call them pre-believers instead of unbelievers. So after he looked around, he came to us and he blurted out, "That was a miracle." Then his face got really red at the impact of what he said, because he doesn't believe in miracles. And then they explained by the trajectory, they could tell the hole and all the glass around me and glass in the back seat behind my husband, the driver. They knew that was bullet. And the course would have gone right through my head. And somehow God, the evidence was there, but he protected me. I don't know how. And they couldn't find the bullet hole. And an exit hole, and they couldn't find the bullet. And they can't explain how that happened.
Wow, that definitely is a miracle. Boy, glad you're alive and be able to share your stories here. So what made you decide to become an author? What made you decide to do some writings?
Well, he gave me so many amazing stories. And some of my relatives don't understand my divulging certain things about my family. And some of them didn't like it. I could help a lot of people with really sad childhood. And so hundreds have told me it gave them hope, both for their parents and for their own lives. And they knew their wounded spirits, their wounded souls could be healed. And so it tells about my traumatic childhood. It tells how God can change your life, take your bitterness away. And it showed how he has a purpose for every life. And there's so much joy and fulfillment if you're in the center of God's will. And because of my God-arranged appointments leading me to Jesus, I prayed as a baby believer, God, I want to be a part of those God-arranged appointments. I want to lead others to you and show them your love, just like you showed me your love through these appointments. And that's why I think I have all these amazing things happening. And he knew that I love telling people these stories, and I love to write. And I'm going to write 4 more books eventually. And another way he protected me that was pretty amazing. I was in the gun tower. I had many different assignments all over that prison. Let me divert for a moment. I had worked there many years, and I had a position that had Saturday, Sunday off, and it was 8 to 4. And most people, that's what you want. I had Friday, Saturdays off, 8 to 4. And it was a very safe thing, but it had lots of action too. And then inside my heart, God is at work within you, both to will and to do of his good pleasure. I started feeling I'm supposed to ask for vacation relief, but I didn't want to do it. That's scary. That means you have to change your job assignment every 2 and 3 weeks to take the positions, the assignments of officers on vacation. And at that time, we didn't get to choose what assignments. The watch lieutenant, now you can choose, but the watch lieutenant would assign you. And later, but it was really scary thought, being all over 2 prisons, east and west, working different hours. Sometimes I have to be in the kitchen, all the way in the kitchen, which means you have to start like 20 minutes early to get there and be at your assignment at 4:30 in the morning. And I'm a night person. And I have to get up at like 3:30 or 3, or starting at 10 o'clock at night, or 6 o'clock at night, or 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So I had to learn to be flexible with my sleep and sleep nighttime, afternoon, all hours, and interrupting your day to go to work in the afternoon, late at night, early in the morning. I didn't want to do it, but I knew there's only safety, especially at the prison, in the center of God's will. So reluctantly, I put in the request before I chickened out. As soon as I put in the request, I started having like kind of excitement and joy, and God changed my heart. Now, some of the assignments were difficult and scary, but then he increased my faith through the difficult ones. And I learned that every job change, every 2 and 3 weeks, were for a specific purpose of God. And it was fun to look forward to what it was going to be like. And it was usually to reach an inmate, sometimes an officer, one time an associate warden, program administrators, for the Lord. And it became exciting adventures. And that's in the book.
That's true. Do you have any advice about maybe a woman, a young lady wanting to get into the prison system, or anyone young by that means? There's a lot of issues today, what's going on in our world and our society, and it's scary for anyone. But do you have any maybe advice or recommendations for someone considering that path?
My recommendation is don't do it unless you're close to the Lord, because you can come in with a real pure motive. I didn't know the Lord when I came to work for the prison, and I wanted to help men change. And I came in with a positive attitude towards the inmates. You get so much verbal garbage. There is so much tension, so much anger and hatred. I could feel my heart getting cynical and bitter before I gave my life. A strong purpose. And don't do it for the money. It's not worth it. And there's officers there that have been counting the days so they can retire. And they've got years to go. I don't think you should ever stay in a job for money that you don't enjoy. That's 1/3 of your life,
Yeah.
1/3 of your day, every day, 5 days a week.
And I can relate. As you know, I did 21 years in the Air Force. And it was definitely not for the money. It's something you just want to do, and you feel you're making a difference and hopefully touching people in the right way. And I'm on board with you. Put God first and have a relationship to be most effective, because we need someone we can go to and trust in our own lives, that we can fill that void that we have and be able to help others along the way. So it's crazy. So
Joe?
Yeah.
I actually felt sometimes I was going to explode with joy in that terrible place.
Wow.
I had so much joy when someone got touched by the Lord. And I'm not kidding you, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds gave their lives to the Lord. And then when I finally retired after 23 years, I was shocked. An officer that never really talked to me, never was really friendly with me, wasn't a believer, phoned me a day or two before I left. And he said, honey, this prison's not going to be the same without you. I watched how you interacted with the men. I watched how they acted after you've talked to them and prayed with them. And I saw the changes in their life. And he didn't want it for himself yet, but he could see the change and appreciated what God did. It's nothing that I did. It's what God did. If it was left to me, I'd be talking to the wrong people. I'd want to talk to the clean-cut, nice-looking ones. He sent me to the roughest, toughest bikers many, many times. And these tough men would cry right in front of their tough buddy as they gave their lives to the Lord. And their tough buddy would watch this man change. And then weeks later, they'd come to me and give their lives to the Lord. And one man, he said, Officer Honey, when I was working in a dorm, or I don't remember if I think I was a yard officer, and I was doing something inside somewhere. And he said, when you can, I've got 5 inmates lined up ready for you to tell them about God. I've got them ready for you. And of course, I'm security minded.
Sure.
So I had it lined up, and then I would face the yard, they would have their backs to yard, and I learned to constantly look like this while I'm talking. And I said, I'm really listening to you. I'm really paying attention to you, but I have to make sure nobody's using this for an opportunity to do something they're not supposed to do. And I've watched officers talk to each other about sports and not look around. So I know I was more security minded talking about the Lord than they were, quote, doing their job.
Oh, wow, that's fantastic.
And I actually had a lieutenant stand up and shake my hand and said, honey, I'm glad you're in my quad for these 2 weeks.
Wow. That's.
But some people had to be careful. They didn't want to be associated with me because I was known as a Bible-thumping Jesus freak. And even some Christians didn't want to be associated with me, guilt by association. And they were closet Christians. They didn't let people know they were Christians because they didn't want the persecution. Because many times you're going to get ridiculed, you're going to have persecution. But God even uses that for good. I would get phone calls from strangers saying, I heard the terrible things they said about you at the prison. I go, oh. He says, and then this officer would say, but then I knew who to call because I want to ask about God. I'm really hurting.
Wow, that's a whole testimony. A lot of us, like you said, there's too many closet Christians out there. We're afraid to let people know, and not really sure why, because we're going to be ridiculed by others. And once we get over that,
the very first time after I was a baby, brand new 1 or 2 week old Christian, I went to a party, and they were some people were talking about problems with their kids and wayward kids. And I felt this prompting in my heart, and I was really scared to do it. I was afraid of rejection because I had a lot of rejection in my life. So I obeyed the prompting. And this was my very first time that I told anything about God. And I was scared. I wanted to be liked. And I said, well, I don't know how you feel about prayer, but this is what happened when I prayed. And they listened. And I told them about what God did in a certain circumstance. And then one of them even went to church with me and gave her life to the Lord. And after that, I talked a lot. You can see I talk a lot about it everywhere I go.
No, praise God. It's those little things when someone recognizes our efforts and asks for us to mentor, coach, just listen to them. I mean, that's all God's intervention. If we would just stop and become that vessel, let him do his work. And that's challenging for all of us.
And lots of them happen, these God arranged appointments happen in restaurants. And a lot of restaurant owners have given their lives to the Lord. Many times I'll be prompted to go, not now, of course, but, well, I guess some restaurants are open, but I would go on their quiet times, like 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, and the restaurant will be empty, and I can talk to them, and they want to listen because they're bored, and they give their lives to the Lord. And they can't go to church easily because they're there all the time. So it'd be hard to reach them except out of church.
Good point. Good point. Things are opening up now, as you know. And in fact, I even went to a restaurant for lunch today, and sure, we had to wear a mask, but boy, the politeness, the courtesy, the customs and courtesies, it's been phenomenal this past week or so. And I hope it continues. I hope it continues. And I know we're just trying to be safe despite what's going on around us. But is there any last minute words of wisdom that you have for our viewers out there, despite what they want to do in life? Is there something you recommend or words of wisdom that they can continue to have a fruitful, happy, joyous life?
Well, really, if you've experienced a lot of hurt and pain, I would just love Romans 8, 6 and 7. No, excuse me, that's about the carnal mind. Romans 8, 28. For we know, we have to know it, for we know God will turn everything around for good. And I want to put in eventually. But the two conditions are for those who love God and are called according to his purpose in King James. And that means he promises to turn everything around for good eventually. But the conditions are if you love God. And if you love God, you want to obey him, it says in John. And that means you're trying to fit yourself in the center of his will. If you're in the center of his will, then he can protect you, turn everything around for good. And you can just know his protection, his peace, his joy, and his fulfillment. Just, it's wonderful to try to fit yourself in the center of his will. And it comes by opening your heart and trusting him with your whole life. And don't hold anything back, because anything he doesn't want for you is harmful, damaging, and can ultimately destroy your life. And it's often a cheap counterfeit of something better he has for you. So I really urge people to trust him. Just go all the way. Don't hold back. It's kind of hard if you're trying to keep a foot in both worlds, because you're kind of going to be miserable and you're going to feel guilty. But if you go all the way, that's where the joy and the peace comes. And if you don't feel peace and you're a Christian, kind of go back when you last lost your peace and try to correct whatever it is God was dealing with you with then.
Oh, I love that. Just go all the way. Don't look behind you. Just keep moving forward. And and make a difference out there. I just want to encourage our readers to get this book, Officer Honey.
Oh, and
Yes,
my website.
yes, Light in the Darkness. So what is your website, honey? How can people get a hold of you? And how can
Yeah.
they buy this book?
Yes, thank you.
Yes.
The book is on Amazon.com.
Yeah.
Officer Honey. If you forget that, if you just type in Officer Honey, it'll pop up. And there's also a story about me that was in the Telegram Tribune. That's interesting. That'll pop up usually. But my website is www.honeyfromtherockministry.com. honeyfromtherockministry.com. Right now, I can't put new things in, but there's lots of interesting things to read. My blog, as much as I was able to write before it stopped, and I've got to get it fixed soon. And it's got things, interesting things, and some pictures, and some letters to me. And it's quite a full site that I got to get working. If anybody knows how to get websites to work again, maybe they can tell Joe and you can tell me.
I understand. I have to hire someone to fix mine every now and then. It's not one of my strong suits, and I do keep up with it. But we'll make sure to put your link to your blog in this show so readers can find that, because it's so important to, when we have a message to share it. We don't want to be closet Christians. We don't want to be closet people of faith. We don't want to be closet anything. If we have a story, something positive to share, and I appreciate you sharing all that positivity despite some of the negative or challenges you had, especially in the childhood. A lot of us go to those struggles, and some people fall off the deep end, and well, you persevered, and life's not easy, but you found a way and you made a difference in this world. And I really appreciate you being on our show today and talking to our readers. And well, life is good, and I salute you.
Thank you. I enjoyed it, and I appreciate you, Joe, so much. And thank you for asking me. It was an honor and a privilege. Bye.
Thank you so much, honey. Well, you're in the office with Joseph Skoda. Make sure you share, you like, you subscribe to our channel, because we have more and more inspirational messages to share, and motivation, and probably more importantly, ways to put empowerment back into your life. Nothing's perfect. Make sure you surround yourself with the right people, the right message, and stay positive. Life can be great, but it's up to you. Thanks again, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye now.